All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Matt Harris with the Magento Association Podcast, and this is episode number 2 with the legendary Ben Marks. I hope I can say legendary. You're legendary.
I guess I am.
I get to decide that, so I'm deciding you're legendary. Anyway, Ben, welcome back. And on this episode, we're going to jump into. We talked a little bit in the previous episode about Ben's background, a little bit about music. Now we're going to really lean in on the Magento Association. Ben has a lot of thoughts, he knows the whole history. So we're going to just let Ben jump in. So why don't you give us a little bit of background, and then you can get into your current role in the Magento Association.
So, so the background of the association, it goes all the way back to the earliest days of Magento, right? Before Imagine, before really this community had come together and to become this massive thing that it became. So there was when Magento came out, the open source ecosystem in Europe kind of took off more quickly, right? Because open source is it's endemic there, and it was Magento was a perfectly timed tool for the market. So you had like some German folks and some Dutch folks who had like some of the first Magento events, right? Meet Magento. You had Dutchento. I think that was Guido Janssen, and probably some others. Maybe not at first, but eventually, But anyway, you had these centers of community that established themselves in Europe. And one of the things that happened early on was someone got the bright idea. A guy named Thomas Fleck, who I believe is at Orocommerce now, created a German sort of nonprofit that called the Meet Magento Association. And that actually was a bit of an interesting trademark issue because it was filed well before Magento filed for a trademark in the EU, right? So it stood. And one of the things that we saw, around 2017, 2018, my boss, Mark Leonard, at the time, he was basically the mergers and acquisitions pit bull. I say pit bull. I mean, probably sounds delicate. Mark was a great guy. He totally got the completely sort of economically or balance sheet indefensible cost of someone like me and Sherry doing community engagement versus like the business that they were trying to get done, which is get Magento acquired for Primera, and Hill House, and the board. And we wanted to make sure that there was an entity that existed that could really look after the Magento ecosystem, the total ecosystem. And in the context at the time, I think according to a study we did with IDC, like there was a $5 billion service economy around Magento. So it's a lot of business, and the revenues of Magento at the time were well south of that. I mean, a fraction of that. So most of the economic volume that was taking place in the Magento sphere was happening outside of like enterprise lanes and enterprise circuits, right? So it's a really important thing to look after, but it's really tough for business to look after and invest in or know even what to measure when a lot of this activity doesn't touch the business. So we wanted to have a nonprofit entity in the U.S. that we could work with. And over the years, I'd established a really good relationship with Thomas Fleck and Thomas Galetz, who was the one who ultimately ended up sort of running the Meet Magento Association and doing a lot of work. He invested a lot of his own money in that, and you would have seen him probably at a lot of the Meet Magento events. I actually have a podcast that is episode that's about a year. It's gathering dust, but it'll be coming out soon on my new podcast called Conversations, COMV, Conversations. But we worked. But what ended up happening was we got together with Thomas Galetz. I think this was like 2017, 2018, and negotiated a wind down of the Meet Magento Association, the German entity, closing that out, handling the kind of the brand issue there, and spinning up the Magento Association in Europe. Now, people who've paid attention to the Magento Association over the years would have maybe been a little bit frustrated with its what it was doing, or unclear about what it was doing for the first few years. And there's a good reason for that. Like, we actually thought that there was going to be a just latent funding at a minimum level of like $1 million plus every year. And I wasn't responsible for establishing that precondition. We definitely had to help get any funding at all from some of the early investors, PayPal and others. Some of whom still invest in the association to this day. But we used Smith Buckland, which is a trade association management company based in Chicago. This is a name that'll be familiar to a lot of people who've been kind of following Magento and Magento Association over the years. And their services were really designed for well-funded, well-established trade associations. And we weren't that, right? So we ended up having to take cobble together like an a la carte service offering with them that really wasn't suited to their business model, I think. And it certainly wasn't exactly what we needed. And we also didn't have experienced association folk running it, who were sort of, who didn't work for Smith Buckland. So the end result was like, we were kind of mired down in like learning what the process is and like the rituals that you have to have a properly running association. But we basically got kind of bogged down in the details, and it wasn't really able to do much. And I actually I knew I was going to be leaving Adobe, around 2020 or so. And I actually stayed several months longer because I was really hoping to get the association to a different place and get them, and get them moved out from Smith Buckland. Not casting any aspersions there. Honestly, we should have probably forced that change earlier. But I was glad to see after I left around March of 2021, it didn't take too long for the board and others to actually like start making some of these changes and figure out how to run this thing on their own. And
so does the sorry to interrupt you. So does
Please.
The Magento Association predate Adobe?
No. Well, actually, good question.
So there was Meet Magento, right? There was that trademark in Germany, and then they just somehow negotiated. Well, we're using it again, but anyway, Mike. So when you said funding, I was wondering, like, okay, was the assumption Adobe would be funding the association?
So,
or at least?
Yeah, there would be funding from Adobe, which Adobe was there from day one, but and also PayPal. But it's just like there was this casual idea, and I don't know that anyone was ever actually really responsible for formulating this or even validating that like, oh yeah, this assumption is true, that there will be like, oh, it'd be nothing to get a couple $1 million a year to make sure that this thing can be really operational. And so there's, again, like there's no one to blame here, unfortunately. I mean, of course, someone ultimately is to blame. I don't know who that is. Knowing what I know now, I would have probably asked some questions and said, hey, let's get some actual commitments ahead of this. But as it turns out, so I think that the timing was the association, Magento Association, was being created at a time before I knew the Adobe acquisition was coming. But it, my boss certainly did. I'm pretty sure he did. And then I only got brought into that deal very, very, literally at the very end. It just became aware.
Well, and plus the Adobe Commerce brand hadn't happened yet, right?
No. Yeah.
So they were still like, in terms of investing in the brand name and the association, it made a lot of sense. But then Adobe Commerce comes out as a brand, and now all of a sudden there's this kind of like, which brand are we going to invest energy into if you're Adobe, right?
Yep. Well, and the Magento brand had always been a struggle. I mean, I remember meeting with
still a struggle, man.
Well, yeah, with Peter Sheldon, right? Who was he was on the team under Mark Leonard as well. Brilliant analyst. He's got a startup going right now. Just a really, really fun, sharp guy. And we were in a conference room, small conference room at Magento Live Australia. I think Sherry was absolutely doped up on cold medicine, And we're like, what do we do about this brand? We're thinking like Magento, like community, and Magento, like, because they wanted to differentiate the different Magentos. And I think it was Sherry who proposed like Magento open source.
Yeah,
or
because we used to call it community.
Maybe it was community. Gosh,
no, there was community and enterprise. That's what we used to call it.
Community.
Yeah.
Community and enterprise and like, anyway. So Sherry can actually gets credit for that. She'll be able to correct me, I'm sure, once this comes out. But it was always a struggle, right? Because again, like certainly from an internal perspective, Magento. If you were a salesperson selling Magento, like inside Magento was its own biggest competitor, like bar none. Like no other platform came close. So there's always this thing of like, how do you make this? You have this free tier, and that is the core of the commercial product. And ultimately, I think the thing that has made the biggest, first the thing that made the biggest difference was when we bought Bluefoot, which was a thing I had stumbled across at a Magento meetup in London. Who convinced the company to buy, didn't realize that they would actually, sort of firewall it and make it basically make it part of the enterprise suite. But that feature was actually materially important in selling Magento Enterprise.
What piece was that?
That was the page. It was what became Page
Builder. Well, now it's open source.
And now it's open source, right? So that change should have happened around 2018. There's some history there that I've talked about before, but so, but anyway, it was just always tough to kind of carve out the space. Ultimately, I think the B2B suite is really one of the crown jewels in as far as Magento 2 goes.
Yeah. And shared catalogs, I think, with enterprise.
Yeah. So there's
or Adobe Commerce. Sorry.
Well, from a product differentiation standpoint, I mean, you can see the challenges there, and then of course Adobe has their own branding. Adobe were really cool in the early days. So like we were spinning up. We were in the process of spinning up the association. I if I remember correctly, I think it was post acquisition that the association was actually like became a legal entity in Illinois, not for profit. But the planning and the process to get to that point and to get that first slate of board candidates together, that all had been going on for a long time. And so that meant that when Adobe had something it could relate to, and one of the most important, and this is critically important, and this is actually demonstrative of why it was important to have the association at all, was we had to negotiate the brand sublicensing agreement with Adobe. So they've just paid almost $1.8 billion for this thing.
Right.
They get it. And then they have someone like me coming to them saying, oh, hey, by the way, there's this whole series of events that have
the trademark
have your trademark included in it. And they just sort of happen because someone says, I want to do this and I want to do this in this country. And you can imagine like dealing with a brand team at a company like Adobe, which I mean, really understands like the economics of brands and branding. Was a tough nut to crack, and there was a person on the brand team there who I think took a little convincing. Brittany Mascara I think she was amazing behind the scenes, helping to sort of sell the importance of this. And so what Magento Association has to this day is a durable sublicensing agreement where we basically say, hey, we're going to make sure that the standards are up to snuff, but we are the entity that can work with potential organizers and say, yes, you want to have a Meet Magento Kerplakistan? Okay, we're going to ensure you know how to do it and that you execute it well and that it doesn't end up being a negative. And now of course, Adobe at any point in time, the way Trademark works in the US, like they have the right to say you can no longer do this. There's some mechanics involved there, but essentially Magento is still owned as a brand by Adobe, but they give Magento Association autonomy in this area, and they still to this day make an investment. They financially support the association, and they will also staff things up. It's not always exactly what we want.
Well, they also maintain some of the code base too, right? Like they're putting skin in the game for the.
They have skin in the game. I mean, I think I don't know what the ramifications of them abandoning it from a commercial standpoint would be, because you still have on-premise installations that
Totally.
fundamentally go back to, so these are enterprise agreements, and they're backed up by this open source core. But that's why I think that's part of the reason why you haven't seen any new feature releases for Magento. And I'm ignoring open sourcing Page Builder, but you haven't seen any new feature development for Magento core, like the open source platform, in over 3 years. But they have been doing performance and security updates. So I think it's both. It's a matter of necessity. I mean, from a PR standpoint, it would look bad for them to stop doing it, but also it would materially harm a significant line of business. Maybe not significant revenue at Adobe scale, but the commercial, like the optics of kneecapping Magento at this point would be not even worth it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the most. That's the easiest to understand sort of business reason for the Magento Association to exist. But that also gets us to a point where we are now, which is, now there are multiple paid staff. Myself, Katie Wilson, who I used to work with at Magento as well, who is a stellar reputation among all of the businesses that she worked with over the years. She's great because she's a hard worker. She dumps the bucket out to sort of use her own vernacular. Like, she wants to really, really get into something, truly understand it, and then make policy, make decisions, and plan a course of action. And what I've seen of her over the years is she sticks to her guns, and so she creates an environment where there's a very high standard for execution and participation. She holds, the party that she's a part of to that standard, but she also holds the participants to that high standard. And I think that kind of high touch curation is exactly what is needed right now to help us, get through this incredible period of like innovation and disruption that's happening with LLMs and their ability to compress the complexity of Magento. We actually are probably in better shape now, somehow ironically, than we were over the past few years. I'm ignoring like Huva and some of the other initiatives that have come along in the past few years that have, I think, really helped sustain the Magento ecosystem up to this point.
You were saying earlier in the last podcast, like those early days of Magento, it's never going to be like that again. I totally believe, like, I agree with you too. When I was building my, e-commerce agency back then, there was kind of like a palpable kind of energy about things moving forward and just a lot of excitement. But what I've noticed, and particularly talking to the guys in Europe who own agencies and who are maintaining, like Sergey, at Amnesty, the community is going into this next generation, and there's a lot of energy around maintaining what has been built. So like there was the early days where we're building this thing from kind of as a community from scratch. Now you have an ecosystem with, billions of dollars invested in businesses that are using this software on a daily basis and generating billions of dollars in revenue off of it. And there's this kind of idea that we're going to get to a new level of professionalism with a new understanding of the value of what the software is delivering to the community and the businesses that are using it. And the mindset is slightly changed towards, obviously there's going to be innovation and growth with AI, but there's also the kind of stabilizing of what has been built, the kind of hardening of the foundation in a way. Two things like that. That's different than it was 15, 20 years ago. And I don't know if you...
I mean, look at, I was just having a conversation with someone. I didn't overlap with him really at Blue Acorn, but, just had coffee with him here in town. But we were kind of covering over this. I was just like, because I was talking about those days, like 2015, we released Magento 2 and holy crap. I mean, we really, there's there's been a lot of grace actively or passively offered, I think, to Magento for inflicting that on the ecosystem. We heard a lot of people. The origin stories of Hoover, Willem's been open about it. Like it really goes even back to, some real world stress, business failures that came out. I mean, Magento 2, it killed a lot of agencies almost overnight. Like, because we fundamentally built a much different product than what had existed before, and we weren't introspective enough to recognize that and actually share that with people. We could have come out and said, hey, if you have an agency that is like under 20 people, you will probably not be able to make money with this, right? I mean, I hope no one, if anyone has a problem with me saying this stuff, I mean, I would invite a discussion, but I mean, I think what I'm saying is accurate.
It was a learning experience. So I don't think it's a negative. Like it was hard then.
Yeah.
But I think the whole community went through it, right? And
we did.
Like we're wiser now.
And a testament to the kind of the firmament of what had been built already, that it was able to survive and transform that. Mm-hmm. And then even some of those agencies would have gone on, have like grown into AEM agencies, which is a fundamentally different. That's going to a whole different planet, right? Because you are in squarely enterprise territory,
fully enterprise,
doing things that just solving problems that do not exist even in the upper mid market. So, but I mean, I cite as an example like the fact that there was a default deployment mode. So there were like three. There was like development, production, and default. Like that was the deployment modes that you could have for store operating. And I remember asking at one point, like, about a year after we released at the end of 2015, I asked this question, like, what is default mode actually for? Like I have access to the product team. What is this doing here? Like, oh, well, that's for like people who don't know enough, who are running their own Magento 2 instance, but they don't really know enough about deployment. And so the system, this is kind of like an optimization between cache settings to like sort of refresh the cache when certain things happen. And like, it's basically like you don't actually have to think about the ops of it all. I'm like, that just doesn't, that persona doesn't exist. Like this product does not suit that person. And contrast that when I had joined in 2014, they had just done a survey. 60% of the installations of Magento 1 were actually implemented and even maintained by SOHO operators, like small office, home office. That the person whose store it was the person who was like doing template tinkering and maybe an extension installation and maybe even getting a little hands-on with the code. And that wasn't really ideal. There weren't a lot of better alternatives, at least up until about 2011, 2012. But like that persona was there and had been served. But like that persona was never going to make the jump to Magento 2. And I would argue they should not have. They should, if you were that small, you needed like Shopify. You needed a system that was going to be maintained by someone else, and you would adapt. If you had anything requirements that didn't quite fit their functionality, you were probably better served to adapt your requirements to them instead of like trying to justify the ongoing maintenance. Now, look at today, we still have, I think, about 18,000 transacting Magento 1 stores. Like that still blows my mind. And you have ecosystem initiatives around. Well, and you have ecosystem initiatives, and some of them are still putting up huge numbers. I mean, they're on autopilot, and you have a couple of groups out there that sort of support Magento 1 on an ongoing basis and try and make sure that it still works on latest versions of PHP and that it receives critical updates. Now that we have Mythos out there in the wild, I'm part of the PHP Foundation as well, and we were able to get early access to Mythos through Alpha Omega, which is part of the Linux Foundation, and that is what we've actually been able to start doing some security work on PHP Core. And I hope to actually expand this, along with Alpha Omega. And this is all thanks to actually Anthropic recognizing the need for this, to actually have facilitation and investment in hardening, runtimes and even applications or frameworks. Like Symfony's also had some access to.
Did you see that Mozilla report about Firefox? They got Mythos early.
Yeah.
And they ran it through their bug testing protocol, and they increased their bug finding by
Yeah.
10 out of 20x in 1 month.
Yeah, 271 vulnerabilities. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, it's like, and we're also seeing these, this. It's not just the frameworks and the apps and the runtimes. It's supply chain attacks that that work through dependencies. Like NPM's had a tremendous exposure here. I think we've learned that actually Composer and Packagist have even more sort of strategic import and value and awesomeness than the NPM ecosystem, because they kind of keep a tight rein on things, but it still kind of takes a village. It also takes it takes awareness, like this gated release of Mythos's capabilities. It's allowing us to solve these problems before like everyone is able to inject exploits, because these supply chain attacks are incredibly, like they're incredibly ingenious. They require like multi-step, multi-layer,
it's like a
even
daisy
sometimes
chain
multiple
of exploits. Yeah,
it's fascinating, and it's something that you could have an army of pen testers and researchers. You could red team blue team this till you fall over, and you wouldn't come close to doing all this. I mean, the good thing is, I mean, this is one of the benefits of open source is the code is out there.
Yeah.
And it can be tested. And there's always all eyes on it. And so we're going to end up with not only a more robust runtime application, underlying frameworks, but also supply ecosystem because of this.
Yeah. And there's exactly, I think, because people are trying to exploit open source, which people, that was often thought of as one of the downsides of open source. Everyone's got the code, and therefore, people can learn how to exploit it. But I think some of the closed systems, if you can penetrate them, might actually, if there's a catastrophic breach, it might not be in open source, because open source has already got like some durability built in and flex, but I see a massive exploit happening more in closed systems if you can get in there, right?
Yeah, if you can get in, the worst part, I don't like the lack of transparency.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think the good thing is everyone realizes that PHP has struggled, not for any good reason, but struggled with sort of being a reputation as being a serious thing, even though PHP underpins a significant portion of functionality and content on the web today.
Yeah.
So there's you basically we have to basically be good and proactive, because we can't afford the bad press of a breach. Now, I also remember I was camping at an air show when Shoplift came out. This was like 2014, 2015, and thankfully Willem de Groot from Sansec, who they were able to sell to private equity. Good job there. But Willem was also on holiday, another Dutch Willem guy. And he thankfully literally left his holiday, traveled to a next town over so he could have like Wi-Fi. And we figured out a plan to remediate it was a 0 day, but it wasn't really a 0 day. It was a disclosed remote code execution vulnerability that we sat on for a long time. We sat on for many, 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 many months. And the researcher was like, hey, I'm going to release on this date. You guys need to figure this out. And at first, Magento's approach to that, this will be a good segue back into the association, but Magento's idea was like, well, these are all open source installations that we have no control over. They didn't give us their information. We're not responsible for it. Well, guess what? When the headline is 70,000 stores are, Magento stores are patched, like that's why, like Mage Cart, like there is like Magento branding on a certain class of exploits, even when they don't involve Magento. Right. That's not an accident. That was unfortunately an outcome of an approach that didn't work. But with the help of the ecosystem and the community,
right,
we were able to like kind of get things going and get things resolved. And that ultimately, now there's not that OEM in the room to work with as much. I mean, I think if we found a 0 day for Magento, like there's no doubt that Adobe would absolutely put resources into it, right? It's in their interest. But there are other concerns that exist at this level that normally the manufacturing, like the vendor behind the product, would look after. That's really where I see the association fitting in, and especially the association in its current incarnation with the officers that we have. Noah Ockenberg from Above the Fray. You've got Jisse Reitsma, sort of a legend unto himself, Knockout Jisse, as another officer. I believe he's the secretary, and then you have Sergey from Amnesty for the as treasurer. But basically, these three, as well as the rest of the board, this is a fundamentally different Magento Association than the one I knew back in 2021. It's incredibly operational. I had a multi-page onboarding document with expectations. Sorry, no, I know I'm a little bit behind on a couple of those. And and they've negotiated, we've worked out the transition with the current executive director, Matthias, who is departing, and he's been fantastic and very open and giving of his time to myself, Katie, and the board, just to make sure there's a good transition. But we're looking at doing some really big and important things in the coming year. Now, do we know what all those things are? Absolutely not. We know there's a certain amount of sort of refounding, foundation reclamation, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of good foundation already there, but then I think we also want to create a space where people can come to us and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Because at the end of the day, I think Adobe does have Adobe's in a challenging position because the numbers of the Magento ecosystem are just not they're big. They're not insignificant, right? I mean, these are 9 figures, right? But or unless you're looking at payments volume, you're well into 10 figures there, right? 10 to carry the 1 at 11. Billions in GMV, but the revenues and costs, these are big numbers. They certainly matter a lot to the people in the business, but it's Adobe have to look after the enterprise level. And they have to look. I think they have to look in an enterprise trajectory, and I think that trajectory is more along the lines of of service endpoints, which is what they've been building with ACCS and some of the functionality that they started releasing even while I was still there, some of the search function, intelligent search and stuff that was coming out around 2019. These things were hosted endpoints. So if you wanted that functionality, you gotta engage with them in more of a SaaS way, right? Than in the PaaS or on-prem approach that had existed until then. So that's where I think the association fits in now, is being the entity in the room that can help get this thing to the next step of where it's going. And where it's going, we're actually seeing an increase in the number of Magento installations. I'm at NRF. Anecdotally, I run into a seller from another enterprise platform, and they're like, "Oh, Magento, yeah, I just lost a deal to Magento." And I'm like, "Do you mean Adobe Commerce?" I said, "No, I lost a deal to Magento." That was late 2025 that this deal went through. And it speaks to the flexibility of the solution, but also of the ongoing persistence and relevance of the businesses that are doing Magento development, that it's still a viable option to this day. And I think with the tooling coming out, Damian Retzinger, Gray Core, I had a good chat with him yesterday. He's got some really cool stuff he's about to announce. I think we're about to see a little bit of a Magento renaissance, and I want to take that for a spin. It'll never be lightning in a bottle, right? But at least it'll be a nice, cool, refreshing beverage that we can all enjoy.
Yeah. Well, and just to get back to the whole open source argument, I think what I'm seeing is there's a lot of relevance for open source moving forward. I think there's the climate of, let's just put it this way, what AI has done is it's made individuals and businesses more ambitious to do new things, right? And open source is a great starting point to try new things. And so I think the energy is unlike it's been in years, because AI is getting people to think about new stuff.
This is an interesting point. That is a big part of what this moment is about. Like, obviously there's the hype, any sort of new tech or revolution, there's always the hype, and everyone pours money and hopes and dreams, and CapEx, OpEx budgets just get thrown at the wall for whatever is going to come out of this. And of course there's been overpromising and misunderstanding and everything else. But I think the important thing to pull out from that is exactly what you just said, which is that people are open to the idea of change. Now, And the interesting thing, though, about this particular industrial revolution, I think is not totally inappropriate to call it, is that it actually can deliver, right? So I was surprised when I finally got the courage to start using Claude earlier this year. How embarrassing. I mean, of course, I've been playing around with ChatGPT and stuff, but like actually doing real grown-up programming work again for the first time in 10 years, I thought it'd take me a week to ramp back up to where I was. It took me a day, not even a day. It took me like an evening. And all of a sudden I'm putting together like release sequencing and documentation and methodology and actual code that, even in languages I haven't written, but like, working with the tools out there that I had not better than I had done when I was actually developing. And that was pretty amazing. So I think, that is the difference, is that, out of the hype, we actually have meaningful outcomes. And if you can say like, oh, wow, if with $100 a month, max budget, I would have enough tokens to build that feature that's been just underneath the cutoff in our backlog. Awesome. That we start to move, but like you start to see this period of hope and change and actual results being able to show up proximal to that. Like that's the thing. It's the proximity. It's how rapidly you can actually get meaningful business impactful stuff done. That they say, okay, wow, yeah, let's look at this. And then all of a sudden people start to say, well, how well does our current stack accommodate this new approach, both the technology itself and then the economics? And you can really make the case that it like Magento and open source are they're certain open source in general, Magento in particular in e-commerce, natural fit for this. And I think we're going to see investments increase, assuming the world doesn't spin apart here in the next few months.
We got what I'm seeing or hopeful for as kind of an optimist who works in a lot of mid-market SMB is that the enterprise level solutions are actually coming down market. And this new era of technology is making more cool stuff available to more people, more individuals. And it's empowering a lot of smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses. And so not only is there an appetite for doing new things, it's also coinciding with a generational change of leadership. You're seeing boomers who are reluctant, aging out, retiring, and you've got Gen Xers and millennials coming in and saying, we've been waiting 20 years to fix this shit. And we were always told it was too expensive and we couldn't afford, XYZ enterprise solution. And now here you are,
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, it's happening in a context where, the economics are locked up at the top. I mean, the venture, private equity, essentially an entire shadow banking and investment system. So I mean, the keys are still firmly in the hands of I would say of the bankers and the moneyed the moneyed class. But the fact of the matter is, the technology only multiplies. It's a multiplier. You can't. You don't start with zero and get anywhere because you're just multiplying zero. So where I do think we're going to have some directed effort, and maybe this can be an initiative that happens, maybe under PHP Foundation or under Magento Association or something down the road, is how do we can we make business strong enough that we can say, hey, there's a culture here where, if you really want to get if you want people to see you as being a good corporate steward, like as an agency or as an extension creator or something, you're gonna have an invested like internship program, right?
Mhm.
Because I think if I'm coming out of university today, knowing what I know after decades in this business, like they're not going to have the opportunity to even begin to develop the skills that they can then multiply. I mean, that's the short-term thing. This stuff will all sort itself out. It has to, or society contracts, and it may take society contracting a little bit in order for that to come about. But like, I think we're going to see we'll see some businesses making that investment in the next generation. But in the meantime, it's great that the people who've been operating in this space, they actually have a little bit of power because all of a sudden everyone's knowledge is incredibly portable. All the walls that were there, those walls have shifted. Those walls are gone. And if I'm an investor in a company, I'm going to have to provide tremendous benefit to the operators of that company, and they in turn to like their top end engineers and other folk, or else those people will be gone to some other place where they can make a difference. And this is what you're seeing at companies like Block, where they lay off almost half the organization, but then they're creating entirely new salary bands that are well above anything that we've seen before.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is investor hype crap. I think that Salesforce did the same thing, and then they were like, "Well, we need them back," and it's like, well, they were having a down year, and so they laid off people they were going to lay off anyway, and they said, "Oh, it's because we're retooling with AI." I think you know what I mean. I don't think that they were really. It's a good spin for the investors, but I don't think it was the primary reason for the layoffs.
No. I mean, you're absolutely right to call that out. It is. AI has been a great excuse for resizing companies. Also, we're still in this situation of like stock buybacks, all the stuff now. I know I've benefited a little bit in my time from stock buybacks, but like we're investing in sort of already won wealth, like wealthier, that kind of thing. And that is money that's not being left on the table or left available for ongoing development. I think we're going to pay for our avarice as a society, of the past 10 years. We're going to pay for that generationally. No one's going to care because they're going to be living in it, and the people who live through it will probably have already figured out their way of securing retirement stuff. If any of you have that figured out, call me. But I do, I mean, it is a reality that there are $1 million plus salary bands being created at some of these companies that never had them before, because they simply know, like, well, this person, if we don't do it, they're going to go over there.
Right.
Now we'll see how durable that is, because again, like, it's going to be, who knows what the economy is going to do in a year. And if we have a massive contraction, then the balance of power shifts back to the operators. But but again, I think
bringing this back to because we're trying to. No, I mean, I could go off about this stuff and on. But let's bring it back to the Magento Association for a second, because we're going to wrap this up. But what I think is that the power of community is probably as important as it's ever been. I think change is going to be fast and rapid. Obviously, we know that. So, understand what the community is doing, understand what the community is thinking, understand the direction of software, understand the direction of open source software. All to me are like, you can tell me what you think, but it's like checking the boxes on the association might not have been this relevant for a long time.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I would actually, the way I would put it is that the association, I think philosophically, the association should have always been the entity for collecting and representing and also affecting everything in this space. I'm quite optimistic that in its current incarnation, it can be that. However, it needs to be proved, right? I mean, I think it is on the association to really deliver on transparency, on efficacy, on to earn trust, maybe re-earn trust for some people, earn higher levels of trust, because we can't tell everyone, hey, we are the collection point. That's something we have to earn.
Right.
But, if assuming we do that, then we become a very cohesive, or an apparently cohesive and powerful lobby. It gives us leverage. It lets us have conversations with sponsors. It lets us represent ourselves to the marketplace of ideas. It potentially could. I have strong thoughts and aspirations about what Magento can be in relationship to Adobe, and I think that would benefit both organizations. But I think we actually the association, have to help prove that it'll work.
It sounds like you're ready to level up the expectations. That's what you're saying. That's what I'm hearing.
I very much am, and the best part, Matt, is I may not even be the most excited about this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In the association, right? So stay tuned. For anyone who's not involved, absolutely, please consider becoming a member. The membership numbers matter. But even if for whatever reason you're not willing to become a member yet, or you're not able to become a member yet, we absolutely, every participant is welcome. Yeah. So please make sure that you're reaching out to myself or anyone you might happen to know at the association. We take any and all feedback with respect, and can hopefully help with whatever is important to you. And I think if we're that starts to point everyone in more or less a similar trajectory. And once we do that with enough people and ideas and economic momentum behind us, Magento remains an unstoppable force.
There you go. From the words of Ben Marks, thank you so much for being on the podcast. That was a great conversation. Again, this is Matt Harris with the Magento Association. Listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts, YouTube. Go to the Magento Association website. Join the association. Get the newsletter, all that good stuff. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.